In this module, we will be looking at words. Where do they come from? What is their structure? And how do we understand that structure? So, what is a word? If we look at the dictionary meaning, we get something like a sequence of sounds arbitrarily linked to a meaning. Let's look at the word dog. There's a phonetic sequence of 3 phones, 1 syllable, d, o, g. As a noun, the common meaning is a 4-legged, fur-covered mammal of the canine family, often kept as a pet. However, it can also be a verb, to dog someone, meaning to follow relentlessly, or an adjective, as in the dog days of summer. Still, this one's pretty straightforward. What do we do with the next word? The. It's a definite article, but what does that mean? It's a function word in English. Does the function give it a meaning, or does the meaning come from the function? If we go with the intuitive meaning of a word, it's that a sequence of sounds arbitrarily linked to a meaning, and that when written, there's a blank space on either side. Then dog would be one word. If we use the word in a sentence, the sentence could consist of any number of words. In this particular case, dog is one word, and the sentence is 10 words. Let's complicate things a bit. If a word is also the smallest string of sound that maintains a link to an arbitrary meaning, we start to get into trouble. Boy is a non-adult human male, one such entity. If we add s, that means there's more than one. So, is s a word? It's the smallest string of sound that has an arbitrary meaning. Cross-linguistically, some words are simple. That means internally flat. Others are complex. In Mandarin Chinese, the word le indicates past tense. However, in Yana, an indigenous language from Northern California, one word is the same as an entire sentence in English. So, what do we do now? We all feel intuitively that we know what a word is. But it's difficult to define in a way that is cross-linguistically valid. And since linguists look for similarities among languages, this is a problem. We can accept that a word is what speakers of a language offer as an example of an independent unit of a language. But we still have the first problem of cross-linguistic validity. We can say that a word is written with a space before and after. That's how word processing programs determine word counts. But that's writing. What do we do with languages that don't have a written form? Rather than word, linguists think about morphemes. A morpheme is the smallest meaningful unit in a language. We look for a consistent form with a consistent meaning. And going back to the notion of discreteness from one of the previous modules, we can see that a morpheme can be combined with other morphemes to create larger units of meaning. Here's a made-up word. If you had to look this up, which form would you use? Would you look up anti-reblargistificationary? What form? Reblargistificationary? Blargistificationary? Blargistification? Blargistify? Blarg. What is fun here is that even though the word blarg does not exist, you can understand what the 6 words preceding it might mean. Try it. Think about what these words might mean. Give a fake definition to blarg, and then see if you can come up with all the other ideas of it, all the other meanings here. Some words are monomorphemic. They're simple words. One word, one morpheme. Be careful. That does not mean monosyllabic. Elephant has 3 syllables, but it's monomorphemic. Other words consist of several morphemes, even if they're only 1 syllable. So, for example, girls and oldest consists of 2 morphemes each, while rewashed has 3 morphemes. Complex words are made up of the combination of at least one root plus one or more affixes. The root is the core of the word. It provides the essential component of meaning. The affix is bound material and it modifies the meaning. Affixes can be suffixes, which are placed after the root, prefixes placed before the root, infixes inserted into the root, and circumfixes which surround the root. Let's take a look at this language, Acta, from the Philippines. Infixes find their way into the root of the world. So in Acta, a language found in the Philippines, the infix is inserted after the first consonant of the root, and it turns an adjective into a verb. So we have the word for big. If we insert we get the verb to become big, to grow up. If we have the adjective red and we add the infix we get the verb to redden. If we have the adjective white and we add the infix we get the word to turn white, to become white. Okay? In English, we also have infixes, but they are used for emphasis rather than to create new words. But they also follow a particular rule. Think of flippin'. Abso-flippin'-lutely. Absolutely becomes abso-flippin'-lutely. Think of some other words. Impossible, awesome, beautiful, outrageous. Can you insert flippin' in all of these? Can you think of the rule for where it might go? Circumfixes go on either end of the root, like the German past participles. So you have lieben, which is to love. You have the root lieb, but geliebt, the g and the t are circumfixes. The g goes before, the t goes after. In French negation, there's a little bit of a question there because je ne peux pas dormir. You have the pas, which is the negative marker, and it comes after the verb usually. And there's a ne that comes before, but the ne is very, very frequently omitted. So it's difficult to say that it's really a circumfix. There are different types of morphemes, and they can be categorized based on formal characteristics. So free morphemes can occur independently. They can stand alone without the support of other morphemes. These are, for the most part, the basic words that you know. So girl, cat, dog. Bound morphemes cannot be used alone. They are dependent on other morphemes. So, for example, we have girl plus s. Girl can be used by itself. It's a free morpheme. S cannot be used by itself. It's a bound morpheme. Don't be misled by spelling. French subject pronouns, for example, are bound to the verb, but they're spelled separately from the verb. So, as in je parle. Je parle cannot be the je cannot be separated from the verb. However, they're written as 2 separate words. So be careful. Writing and the language are not exactly the same thing. We can also categorize morphemes based on their semantic characteristics. So there are content morphemes. Those are the ones that have a meaning and they're definable. These are mostly nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs. Function morphemes indicate the relationships between words. They have a grammatical function. So let's look at walk, which is to move along on foot. That's the verb. If we add the s, we have the agreement index, which is third person singular object. The s, is a function morpheme because it indicates the relationship between words. It gives grammatical information. Walk gives the semantic information. We can also look, for instance, at free morphemes that are function morphemes, and that would be, for instance, the determiners such as the or a. The indicates something that's already present in the discourse, something that is new in the discourse. These are function morphemes, free function morphemes. Here's a chart that summarizes the different kinds of morphemes. So we have the meaning properties across the top, the content morphemes and the function morphemes, and the formal properties along the side. And those are the free morphemes and the bound morphemes. So simple nouns, verbs, and adjectives such as man, book, see, hit, young, read. These are free content morphemes. Prepositions, modal verbs, articles, conjunctions, such as in, about, by, can, must, the, and, these are free function morphemes. Derivational affixes, these are affixes that create new words, such as re, un, dis, eyes. These are bound content morphemes. They're content because they have meaning, but they're bound because they cannot appear separate from another morpheme. And we have inflectional affixes such as s, ud, case, aspect, agreement. These are inflectional affixes that give you grammatical information about a word, and they are bound. So these are bound function morphemes. Let's look at some more examples a little on the next slide. So let's take a look at the bound content morphemes in Spanish, for instance. So we've got the infinitive hablar, to speak or to talk. What part means speak? Well, that would be the habl part. The interesting thing is that the form never occurs in natural speech. You don't say habl. You have to have something there, hablar, which makes it the infinitive. And then you have the verb endings, the bound inflection morphemes that tell you the person, the number, and the tense. Bound bases in English are minor examples, there's not very many of them, of morphemes that appear to be acting as the host for bound morphemes. In other words, none of these morphemes in these words can appear independently. So let's take a look. If a gruntled employee is one who is unhappy and always complaining, do you call employees who are content gruntled employees? We don't use that. That actually is a very old word, but it's fallen into disuse. We only use the disgruntled, the part with the negation prefix. If you hire someone to do work around the house, but he turns out to be inept, who should you hire to fix his mistakes? Someone who's ept. What's interesting is, for instance, whelming, the word whelming. There's the overwhelming, but now you hear people say underwhelmed. And that is relatively recent. But it's the same kind of thing. You don't find whelmed by itself. Let's look at the difference between derivation and inflection, because I've been using these terms already, so let's define them. Derivational morphemes change the meaning of the word, and they're idiosyncratic in their affixations. So some will attach to nouns, some will attach to verbs, some will turn verbs into adjectives, some will turn verbs into nouns, and there's no real predictability. You can't predict which ones will attach to which words. So for example, by this I mean, we have the verb create. And if we add the noun morpheme, the derivational suffix that creates a noun, we get creation. If we have the verb develop, we also have meant, which takes the verb and turns it into a noun as well, and we get development. But however, we can't put the meant onto create, and we can't put the yun onto develop, although both of these morphemes will take a verb and turn it into a noun. The important thing here is they also occur near the base word. They're very close. You have the root, and then the derivational morphemes are attached to the root. Inflection does not add meaning. It gives grammatical information. It doesn't change the meaning of the word. It doesn't make it negative or positive or turn a noun into a verb, but it does give grammatical information. and it applies to all members of a class. So if you have create, ed, created, develop, ed, developed. So the ed is the past tense morpheme. You can attach that to any verb and you're going to get the past tense. And these guys occur on the margins. So you'll have the root, and then you'll have derivational morphemes, if any, and then you'll have the inflectional morphemes at the edge. So, how do you figure out the morphemes in a language you don't know? First of all, you assume the perfect morphological relationship of one form to one meaning. You assume this until you see evidence otherwise. Pay attention, for example, to the morphemes in this example from Persian. Okay? All of these words have a connection to the concept of buying. What bits of it are consistent through all 6 examples? In other words, take a look at this. What are the little bits and pieces that are the same all the way through? Okay? Then look and see the first person singular and second person, third person. See what you can find. See if there's what the negative participle might be. Okay? There's a video in this module that walks you through the process of morphological analysis. Make sure that you watch it before attempting the problem set. Now, unfortunately, there are potential pitfalls in morphological analysis. So there's non-ideal situations. You might have many forms with one meaning. That's called allomorphy. Remember allophones? These are allomorphs. They're phonologically conditioned, for instance, such as dogs versus cats versus roses. So we've got a plural morpheme, but it's got 3 different shapes, s, z, and es, depending on the root that it attaches to. Others are morphologically conditioned. You have irregular forms. Now, the irregular forms are usually very, very old words and very, very common words, which is why they've stayed in the language and they haven't been regularized. Uncommon words become regularized simply because people don't use them often enough. So we have irregular forms such as man, men, tooth, teeth, child, children. You can see these are pretty basic words that have been in the language for a very long time. You also have special classes. For instance, the f becomes v in the plural with leaf, leaves, and wife, wives, but it does not do that with roof, roofs. Why? I don't know. It's a special class of word. Then sometimes you'll have one form but different meanings, so it's sometimes difficult to quite parse out what the meaning is, and that's where context becomes important. So for instance, the er, the suffix, can mean, if it's a noun, or if it's attached to a verb, it becomes a noun meaning one who does this action. So teach, teacher. A teacher is one who teaches. A farmer is one who farms. A painter is one who paints. Older, on the other hand, this is a comparative morpheme. It's not the verb to noun morpheme. And brother is not a separate morpheme. The here is not a separate morpheme at all. So we have to be careful with that. We also need to think in terms of 0 forms. We've been talking about morphemes that actually have a shape, like the so or zo or the But if we look cat versus cats, the s is plural. But what's the shape of the singular morpheme? Well, that's a 0, okay? And if you remember from your math classes, 0 actually has a value, okay? It's not nothing. It has a value. So it's the same thing. 0 morphemes have a value. They simply don't have a shape. Okay, this is just a quick look at the at morphemes and how we make words. Take a look at the next video where we talk about the different processes of creating words.